When I think of the 60s, the one thing that I don't think about is a black man coming out as a horror movie legend. In the 60s, you had the civil rights movement, the emergence of the Black Power movement, and even in the same decade, events like the Watts riots, the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., and even Malcolm X. But in this same decade, you had 1968's cult classic Night of the Living Dead also released.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I think it's safe to say that horror movies were the furthest thing from the minds of the black community. However, George Romero's Night of the Living Dead inadvertently subverted cultural norms in a very covert way. In today's video, we will be taking a look at just how the first zombie movie ever made also set the standards for black horror movie protagonists. The film starts off with Barbara, a young woman traumatized after the death of her brother when fending off one of the ghouls. She ends up at the house taking shelter where she meets Ben. The two find Helen, Harry, and Karen Cooper hiding in the basement along with the couple Tom and Judy. Tensions rise as the two parties decide how they want to deal with the situation. The film was released on October 1st, 1968. This film comes before the explosion of black exploitation movies in the 70s, so having a black male lead was not only an anomaly, it was virtually unheard of. However, Romero's Night of the Living Dead not only cast a black male lead, but this lead is in somewhat of a position of power.
I'm taking the girl with me.
Leave her here. Keep your hands off her. And everything else is up here, too. Because if I stay up here, I'm fighting for everything up here. And the radio and the food is part of what I'm fighting for. Now, if you're going down the cellar, get.
The man's insane.
When you consider the context during which the film took place, you can see that although not originally intended, race can be seen as a thematic factor for the film. Ben is a black man in the late 60s, just after the civil rights movement. Ben's struggle against Harry Cooper can be seen as a black man's struggle to establish some sense of authority. Although it's been stated that the race of Ben was never a factor for the story, I'd argue that by casting Duane Jones for this part, a racial theme was added whether George Romero and John Russo liked it or not. This comes with the territory of having black skin on film. Although you could try to ignore the racial issues going on at the time, I'm pretty sure that the ending of the civil rights movement and the dissolution of Jim Crow didn't just make racism disappear. Because we have the crumbling of society and essentially the end of the world, Ben is allowed to act the way he is because it's essentially the collapse of a power structure due to there being no society left when the dead are coming back to life. And towards the end of the film, it could be seen as the white male power structure coming back to reestablish control, especially when that party looks oddly like a lynching party. Ben is a character with a personality, thoughts, opinions, emotions. He's not just some sidekick whose actions are dictated by a main character. And he isn't an archetype like the magical Negro or the black best friend or the black cop. There has been a gradual regression in the role of black characters after the 70s. When you look at the major explosion of horror movies in the 80s, how many of those movies had black leads? We are just now seeing the resurgence of black characters that are not secondary in their own stories, and that exude similar traits to what we see in Duane Jones.